Hello, and welcome to our first video for Intro to GIS. I'm glad you're able to find the link and location and all that stuff. Please let me know if you have any problems with doing such or with being able to listen to or follow along with these. I'm hoping we're able to get through a fair bit of content transmission kind of in these videos. So I'm glad you're here, and let's get started. So today, or in this video, we'll be discussing map types. So in this lecture, we'll be talking about a little bit of what is a map, what's cartography, and then some kind of distinctions between different map types. Although there's no kind of hard and fast rule here, there's a general split here between reference maps and thematic maps. So first, what is a map? Right, we all kind of have a decent idea of what it is conceptually, but maybe can't put it into words very well. But map is a representation of a place or reality, right? And maps are not objective representations of reality, right? Not all things are shown. It is the creator, the cartographer, who kind of chooses what to show or what to highlight, what to emphasize. So that's a little bit about a kind of a brief explanation of some maps. What about cartography, right? This is the practice of making and depicting maps. This class, and in fact most of my classes, pretty much all of my classes, we don't delve into cartography very much at all. We touch on the topic of symbology and colors and things like that just a little bit. But really, you could have a whole class on kind of visual design principles and things like that, related as they relate to cartography. But we don't have time for that. So we're really going to be focusing in this kind of lecture on reference maps and thematic maps. Broadly speaking, maps can be broken down into these two different categories: a reference map and a thematic map. Reference maps emphasize location. They show a variety of kind of locations around the world. It could be the entire world, or it could be as small as your hometown, or even say the inside of a mall. Right, that'd be a reference map. And they're primarily displaying objects or locations of objects. And they also could be maps related to directions, how I get from A to B, for instance. And cartography is often a bit more related here to these reference maps in terms of trying to understand how to display accurately and appropriately different location data. Thematic maps, on the other hand, here's an emphasis on the attribute, on the actual data. So they're showing data related to a particular subject or a theme. We'll talk a little bit more about examples of that. But here on the figure, you can see this looks like a population density map. Anyway, okay, let's talk a little bit more about these two maps. Right. Thematic maps can also be broken down into two different kinds. We have thematic maps that are more related to qualitative data, so categorical type data. And then we have maps that are more related to quantitative type data, so numerical data. These qualitative kind of maps, these are things related to categories. So like land use types or states or road types, things like that. These are types or categories that can't really be counted. It's a difference in kind, not amount. That's what we're focusing on. On the other hand, our quantitative maps show or highlight numerical data. And oftentimes we're showing emphasizing the difference between two different places in the quantity of something. We often will the numbers will be kind of categorized or generalized from low to high and maybe split into a couple different categories, often from least to most. But there are many kinds of quantitative maps, and we'll explore a handful of them in the next few slides. And then, very briefly here, we could think of different mediums for maps, so like how they're are displayed, basically. And, one would be a mental map. We talk about mental maps a little bit. And obviously that's not really the realm for class here today, or much at all. The other two, of course, are more of what we're discussing. A tangible map, so a hard paper copy map, right? Where it's not interactive. You can't zoom in and out of the map. What you print, what you see is what you get. Versus a virtual map where it's, interactive on a screen. You can zoom in and out. And these two different types of mediums allow for different types of kind of presentation of data. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later down the line. But those are the two kind of primary types of maps that we're thinking of. So putting all this together, we have kind of this categorization or splitting of map types. We've got mental maps, tangible maps, virtual maps. Tangible and virtual maps can be split into reference maps, emphasizing primarily location or direction, versus thematic maps, which are focusing on data. Right, and then the thematic map can be split into qualitative or quantitative data, and that quantitative data can be split into kind of focus on a single variable, like just human population density, or multiple variables, human population density, as well as ethnicity or literacy or whatnot. Okay, so now I'm going to run through a handful of kind of different map types, just really quickly, some examples of maps that you're likely to see or have run into in the past. Oftentimes we see political maps, right? Or physical maps of the earth that show mountains, land cover types, kind of a rough color scheme that relates to the physical color of the earth. So green being forests and these kind of white or beige areas representing the sandy kind of desert landscapes. Right. So I'll leave you to think about which type of, is it are these generally reference maps or thematic maps that I'm talking about here? We also, of course, have topographic maps. Here's a USGS topographic map where the topography in Salisbury is not really the point here. There's not too much variation, but you can imagine in other parts of the country, the topography stands out a little bit more. Then there are also geologic maps showing kind of subsurface features of where particular rock types or soil types are and how they're distributed. Okay, we've got lots of other climatic map types, including climatic maps. We've got topological maps, which there are a couple different versions of that, like a schematic diagram, something called the Gantt chart, or tree maps. And these primarily display logical relationships between items rather than focusing on their geographical, or rather than being absolutely true to their geographical relationship of kind of distance and direction. These types of maps kind of emphasize their logical relationships. So here, the image that I threw up there was the tube map for the London tube system, and this isn't true to scale or necessarily even direction, but it's emphasizing the connectivity and the linkages, and that's really what's important to kind of you as the tube rider. The connectivity is the important part. Okay, then we have general purpose maps that might also fall into kind of some reference maps, like atlas maps, weather maps, and then what are called cadastral maps, but these are related to real estate and parcel land ownership type of data. So one of the most important and or common types of thematic map is the choropleth map. Kind of a mouthful, choropleth. And the choropleth map is has quantitative data, so quantities, amounts of things, and these amounts or things are aggregated to certain areas, often called enumeration areas. That could be any level or scale of kind of political boundary, from a city block to a city to a county, state, country, etc. And so the data will be kind of aggregated at those various scales. And so here these thematic maps or here you can see this North Carolina color-coded according to the kind of population density. That statistical variable here is the human population density per square mile. Another fairly common type of thematic map is the proportional symbol technique. And this the symbol, it varies in size, width, height, volume, related to the difference in the amount the difference in the amount of the data within the map. So in this case, kind of these larger circles indicate more hazards, a greater number of hazards or instances of an event, rather than a smaller dot where it might only be one or two instances or occurrences of something. A cartogram is a map that kind of purposefully distorts geographic space based on the values of a theme like population size. So one of the more common cartograms that you may see would be like a world map where the countries are kind of bloated or shrunk based off of the relative population sizes to each other. Another type of thematic map is and fairly common, is an isocline or a contour map, where the contours depict smooth, continuous phenomena like levels of precipitation, levels of pollution, elevation, and a single isocline kind of relates to that same values that have the same areas that have the same value. And so here you see a bathymetry of Lake Norman. So this is lake depth, which is basically just the inverse of a topographic map of showing elevation above sea level. Another very common type of thematic map are dot distribution maps. And a slightly different one is dot density, which I'm not going to mention at the moment. But dot distribution maps can be used to kind of map the location of each occurrence of something. And finally, we have flow maps, which are geographic maps, although these tend to be a little bit more kind of a little less GIS and a little bit more kind of art in a sense. Here's a flow map showing kind of the origin and the destination of the transatlantic slave trade, and the relative sizes or proportions of the number of slaves leaving Africa in different locations or origins within Africa, going to the New World. And I believe one of our previous speaker, Miller Cochran, also talked a little bit about some flow maps. Okay, so that's it for today, or that's it for this lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if you have any questions related to map types when you see me next in person. Thank you so much.